Hey everyone, welcome back to the Light Up Your Metabolism podcast. I'm excited to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart that I have not yet addressed on the podcast. And I am going to be sharing about what to do if you have blood sugar crashes. So there's sort of a methodology that I use that I dive deeper into in my blood sugar mastery program. And if you are struggling with blood sugar crashes, please know that first and foremost, I always want you to listen to your body. This is not medical advice. This is just for educational purposes only. These are some things to try. Listen to your body deeply, and please do not override any of your body's symptoms. This is not medical advice at all. So always, if you are feeling unwell, seek, emergency treatment if you need it. Okay. So that being said, let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about what to do if you have blood sugar crashes. So the first thing that we really need to keep in mind is that the goal of helping hypoglycemia and someone with blood sugar crashes is to keep the blood sugar stable by any means necessary at first. That is the primary goal. That is the first objective that we have. So I'm going to talk about what to do if we have blood sugar crashes, but I'm going to start out by saying we want to try to prevent them to begin with. Okay. So when it comes to supporting our blood sugar to be more stable, that typically means that someone may need to eat more often than they're eating now. You may have been listening to me talk on my podcast, on my Instagram, and you may have heard me say that it's not good for your blood sugar to eat very often. And ideally, we don't want to be snacking in between meals. However, if you are having blood sugar crashes, you may need to have food between meals. You may need to eat before bed in order to heal, because the first thing we have to do is stabilize your blood sugar. Because what's happening when we're having these crashes? Let's kind of talk about that first. What's happening oftentimes is that for some reason, the body is not able to use, or it doesn't see that it has any stored energy, like sugar in our liver in the form of glycogen, or sugar in our muscles in the form of glycogen, or stored body fat. There's something hormonally happening, maybe directed by the mitochondria, that is saying, hey, you don't have any sugar in your liver, you don't have any body fat, so we're running out of fuel, so I need you to eat right now. That's often what's happening underneath these blood sugar crashes. So let's say you eat breakfast and that meal kind of lasts you energy-wise like 2 hours. So you digest the meal, you use the sugar from that meal, and now your body should, ideally in a healthy body, tap into stored energy. So it may get some sugar from the liver put into the bloodstream so then it can keep going. Maybe we tap into stored body fat if this is overnight, a longer fast. But in many people, that process is not happening. So the blood sugar starts to dip, or maybe it starts to feel like it, even though it's not going super low. And now your body's like, hey, I don't have any energy left. So if you don't have any energy left and you don't eat, what happens? The blood sugar may go down to a certain threshold. This is different for everybody. Like I said, it may not go down that low. For some people, it will drop very low. And then what happens, regardless, is that we start to get feelings of sympathetic activation, that fight or flight nervous system. We may get heart palpitations. We may get anxiety. We may start shaking. We may feel anxious and panicky. We may start sweating. We may feel jittery, and also some other symptoms too, like feeling weak or brain fogged or tired, dizzy, all sorts of things like this. But that's telling us that our adrenals just stepped in and pumped us with stress hormones to create new blood sugar to get our blood sugar back up. So that process is very expensive for the adrenals. We do not want to rely on the adrenals and stress hormones like epinephrine, which is adrenaline, to raise our cortisol back up. Not only because it feels terrible, but Because it's draining the adrenals. It's putting more stress on the body. It's burning through nutrients that are essential for regulating our blood sugar. So the idea is, when I say keep your blood sugar stable by any means, it is to, I like to think about sending the adrenals on vacation. I like to picture these little pyramid shaped glands that sit on top of the kidneys. I like to send them to the tropics, and I like to think about them laying on a beach chair, their arms back, they're just chilling in the sun, and they are regenerating, they are healing, they are restoring. Now, in the meantime, the idea is we don't want to have to use the adrenals to pump us with stress hormones. That is what we are trying to avoid. So what that may mean is that we have to go against conventional blood sugar advice, and we may need to eat more often. We may need to eat before bed. So if you haven't already listened to the lesson or the podcast on minerals, you will definitely want to check that out, because minerals is a huge part of this story. But if you have your minerals in, that's going to be a primary thing to add in. That's another podcast episode. I'm not sure of the number of it, but it'll say the exact minerals you need if you're insulin resistant. So, and then if you are listening in Blood Sugar Mastery, you're going to find that in the foundations module, and you're going to see the electrolyte guide. So we have to get minerals in because the adrenals need minerals. We need salt. We need potassium. We may need magnesium. Some people, magnesium sends them too low, but we need a good combination of minerals, a good amount of minerals to help support the adrenals in there. Remember, they're on vacation, right? They're relaxing, they're restoring in the tropics. They need hydration. They need minerals. So we need to be taking those in. And now let's talk about what to do when it comes to the food. So the idea is we want to prevent the lows, because the lows are very stressful for our body. So a lot of times people are like, wow, I feel like I have permission now to eat more often, and that's actually helpful. It feels counterintuitive. So when we're setting up a plate of food, we will really want to include a good amount of protein, ideally fatty protein. We want to add a good amount of healthy fats to our plate. We want to add a good amount of fiber to slow the absorption of everything. And then with carbs, that's where we have to personalize things. Some people may need quite a bit of carbs at first. Some people can't do a lot of carbs at first. So I can't tell you exactly what your macros should be. This is where you have to experiment and see what works for you. The other piece of this is that digestion is often a roadblock for getting people to eat the foods that will help them go longer periods of time. That is something we work on in Blood Sugar Mastery right at the beginning. Module 2 is digestion. I do have a program called Optimize Your Digestion for Low Carb Diets, because this piece is really important. If you start to eat a bunch of fats and then you feel constipated, you have pain under your right rib cage, you have gallbladder attacks, you have floating or shiny stools, you have urgent trips to the bathroom after meals, these are all signs that you're not digesting your fat well. If you are eating a lot of protein and you're like, God, I don't even want this protein, I feel like this upper belly fullness when I eat it. Maybe I'm getting heartburn or bloating or burping after meals. Maybe I'm constipated. It feels like the food is just sitting in my stomach, not moving. These are signs of low stomach acid. So these are things, and then all of these can impair pancreatic enzyme release. And so we may not get the breakdown of all the foods. So we have to look at digestion to make sure we're able to digest all these foods. But that being said, if that's sort of addressed, or you're working with me to address that, then we can start to add more things to our plate and eat bigger meals to help us try to go as long as possible without needing to eat. So what I'll recommend is that you wake up and eat before, like within the first hour of eating. Some people are like, Danny, I need to eat within the first minute of waking up. That was me. That used to be me when I was hypoglycemic. But that may be supportive for some people. Some people who have reactive hypoglycemia, where they crash after meals, maybe that's not necessarily the best strategy for them, but I'm just throwing out a bunch of ideas because this is for educational purposes only. So we may eat this meal, try to have it really well balanced with proteins, fats, fibers, and maybe some carbs to help you go as long as possible. Then we're going to see, how long does that meal take you? Maybe it takes you an hour. That would not be a well-built plate. I would really suspect some digestive issues there and maybe some other things going on. Maybe it takes you 2.5 hours. Maybe it surprisingly takes you 3 hours because you've built your plate in this way and you've added more building blocks, energy that takes you longer. Whatever it is, what we want to do is then start to eat again, what I call a mini meal at the very first sign of that you may experience that you know you need to eat. So everyone has different symptoms, but you will want to eat at or right before that very first sign. So you can use that as sort of a barometer, like, okay, I ate a meal and then at like the 3 hour mark, I started to feel symptomatic. So what you can do the next day is then eat that mini meal instead of right as you feel symptomatic. You can eat the same breakfast and then eat that mini meal at, let's say, 2 hours and 45 minutes to prevent the low. That is always going to be the best strategy, is that prevention. Because once we have those symptoms, we may start to feel, depending on how fast our blood sugar drops, we may start to feel panicky. And now we are correcting a low instead of preventing a low. So now let's talk about what to do if you're like, okay, at 3 hours, I'm starting to feel symptoms. If it is a mild form of symptoms, you're just like, ooh, okay, definitely need to eat something pretty quickly. What I would suggest is starting with, you can experiment with the following. You can start with just fat. You can see is it just, I need a little bit of fat. Maybe you do like a tablespoon of coconut oil blended in some herbal tea, or a tablespoon of butter blended in some herbal tea. Maybe you do just some cheese or something like that. Maybe you do some avocado, which is mostly fat. And maybe that can help take you a little bit longer, because fat doesn't have an impact on our blood sugar or insulin, but it can provide energy for you to go longer between meals. But many people who have blood sugar crashes, their mitochondria are not good at burning fat for fuel, so they may not be able to utilize that fat to help to stabilize them. Now, one of the things that we think is that when we're having a blood sugar crash, I would say, as long as it's not sort of in this emergency category, we would really want to think about stabilizing, not raising. Because as you have probably experienced, if you raise your blood sugar very high, it's just going to crash down again. So if you're in sort of an emergency situation where your blood sugar is crashing super low, super fast, you may very well need some fast-acting glucose, a glucose tablet, glycogen. You may need something like that. I am not really going to provide much input on the emergency situations, because I feel that would be irresponsible as a practitioner who focuses on holistic health, long-term health. I am not providing medical information in an emergency. That's not my forte. And that is not, I just feel like it would be kind of stepping on some toes there. But again, I want you may need to use those things as a life-saving effort. So please be responsible, and please default to what you feel in your body or a medical practitioner. So in that case, if it feels like an emergency, just using fat, if your blood sugar is dangerously low, that would not work. That would not be an indication. Okay, so please be careful here. So if, again, we're having a mild sort of experience, we then, and the fat doesn't necessarily work, we may then want to add on protein. Protein has that stabilizing effect to our blood sugar. It does cause a little bit of a blood sugar and insulin response, but that can be okay for some people. So maybe we do chicken and some guacamole, or we do a hard-boiled egg that has protein and fat with it. So maybe that can give us enough to kind of just support us and help us go to the next meal instead of spiking us. It's more thinking about like a stabilizing effect of the blood sugar. If that doesn't work, we think about adding in carbs as well. So we can do some protein, maybe a little bit of fat and maybe some carbs. That would be for more of like a moderate dip where you're like not feeling great, but you don't want to have just straight carbs because you don't want to get that huge spike. Maybe a lower fat protein and some carbohydrate can be supportive in that experience. So this is something that you can experiment with and you can try on yourself, as long as it's not super an emergency situation. So why do I say the word mini meal and not snack? Well, I want you to close your eyes if you're not driving and conjure up the thought of a snack, and now conjure up the thought of a mini meal. What is the difference between the two in your brain? In my brain, I automatically, when I think snack, I think of something packaged. I think of a beef stick. I think of a nut butter packet. I think of a granola bar. I think of like a piece of fruit. I think of snacks, snack foods, right? Snack foods are not going to be as healing for your body. They're also going to likely be processed. So what I like to do is think of mini meal. When I think of a mini meal, I think of a well-balanced plate of food, just a smaller one. So, and this also can really help with your preparation. So you could, for example, make breakfast that has lots of proteins, fats, fibers, some carbohydrates, and just make a bigger amount and then save a little mini meal, so a smaller version of that breakfast for when, if you need it between meals. And then that mini meal can help take you to the next actual meal where you would, let's say, eat lunch. And so you can do the same thing. You can make a bigger lunch and then just save a part of it and use that as your mini meal between meals. So then we don't have to be thinking about all this food, because eating this often is so draining. It is so, you're not feeling well, and then you're just having to be in the kitchen cooking and cooking and cooking. So this is also a cook smarter, not harder type of a deal. So we want to think about mini meals in between meals. So we can try a combination of just fat and protein, fat, protein, carb, or protein and carb. So those are, or just carb in more of an emergency situation. Again, that's not my forte. That's not what I'm really speaking to. So, but those are some things that we can try if we are having this low. And we want to think about the idea of, ideally, we do want to try to get to where it's just fat that doesn't impact our glucose or our insulin. And then sort of the second option would be just having a little bit of protein and some fat. So we're not getting a lot of glucose and insulin into the system, because we want all of those things to sort of settle and balance. And we don't want to be adding so much sugar that we're going on a roller coaster. So the same thing goes for overnight. If you need to eat before bed, I would say use that same sort of little upside down pyramid where it's like, start with just fat, see if that helps, fat and protein, see if that helps. Or some people do protein, fat, and carb, see if that helps. And some people do sort of just energy in the evening. So someone had, I'm not a big fan of bread. It's a very processed carb. It has gluten. Gluten is a very hard to digest grain. It's often sprayed with glyphosate. But someone had some sort of like a bread with it was some form of carb with it. And, or maybe it was fat. Oh, sorry. It was almond butter. So it was the bread as the carb and the fiber, and then the almond butter to take them overnight, which is mostly fat. And that was helpful. So a carb and a fat can also help to stabilize, but you're giving yourself a lot of energy. So ideally, we don't want to be eating a lot of fats with carbs, because that will cause us to store a lot of body fat. But as you may have heard in a previous podcast episode, we can't try to lose body fat first as the primary goal when we have hypoglycemia. Because as you can see, if you are trying to lose body fat, you're not going to eat between meals. You're not going to combine your carbs with your fats, which you may need to at the beginning. You may cut calories, and your body doesn't want that right now. It needs to feel nourished and go long periods between meals so that we can eat less often. So as we are trying to stabilize our blood sugar by any means necessary, this means avoiding those dips. Now, that all of a sudden, when you're actually eating and you're eating in a timely fashion to avoid feeling these feelings, you may find that you feel stable all day long and you can go longer at night. You may not have these dips at night, or they may be more mild. And then all of a sudden, you may find that you can go longer between meals. You don't have to go only 2 hours and 45 minutes. You can go 3 hours. Then you could go 3 hours and 15 minutes. Then you can go, oh my gosh, is it 3 hours and a half between meals? So what starts to happen is, as we're preventing the lows, as we're supporting the body underneath, we're giving lots of good minerals. We're doing stress reduction practices. We are taking known stressors out of our lives if we can control it. Sometimes people have to stop exercising. Sometimes people have to journal and start feeling their feelings. Sometimes people have to get out of a bad job or relationship. We are also working on supporting our circadian rhythm, getting outside, getting that natural sunlight. All of that can be very stress reducing, especially the morning sunlight when it's not too hot, especially grounding when we're just soaking up electrons. All of these things, we have to work on these healing things underneath. And then we also have to work on the digestive piece so we can eat all these healthy proteins and fats that are helping stabilize our blood sugar. And all of a sudden, we can start to go longer between meals. Now, after that, we may need to switch our macros in a certain way. And so this is, again, what I work with people on in the program, is to know, in Blood Sugar Mastery, to know how to then step down their carbs and step up their fats to get into a place where they are burning fat efficiently for fuel. So that would be a next step. And that's something that I personally have to kind of guide people through. But that is sort of an overview of what to do when there are these dips in your blood sugar, because we don't want to just be eating all the time and be like, oh, now I don't have any blood sugar dips, but I have to eat 7 times a day. We don't stop there. Okay. So that's not where we stop. That is a first step. That's the completion of the first step. And then we may have to play with changing up some macros. We may need to play with adding more minerals to see if you could go longer between meals, and all those things that I mentioned to help promote more of the healing underneath, so that we can effortlessly go longer between meals and we don't have to eat as often. So that's sort of the progression that I see with my clients. But I hope that this first step and the emphasis on trying to avoid the lows to begin with is a really helpful strategy for you, because something I really need to mention: do not push through the lows. Do not do it. Do not do it, no matter what you feel. If you feel your blood sugar is low, if you see that it is low, I do not recommend trying to push through. That is only stressing out the system that is already stressed. That is putting way too much stress on our adrenals that are like in the hospital weighing on a sun deck in the tropics. They're healing, they're recovering. And then you're like, hey, I need you to be taking care of this because I'm not going to eat and I need you to cover. It's like, no, they don't have the bandwidth to do that. So every time you ask your adrenals to cover for you because you're not eating, you are weakening that system and you are worsening the root cause. So this is why we can't, quote, try to lose weight first. We will get there with the weight loss when you can effortlessly eat less often between meals. But if it's effortful, if you're symptomatic, that is worsening everything. That is not going to promote weight loss. Your body is not going to feel safe. It's going to be like, oh my God, she never feeds me. I need to hold on to all this body fat. We have to restore the body's ability to burn its own fuel. It will never learn to burn its own fuel if we keep pumping it with stress hormones, because those stress hormones are going to continue to lock up our stored fuel. And what I mean by that is that when we have high cortisol, that's going to promote high insulin. That's going to dysregulate leptin. Leptin gives a read on how much energy we have on our body. If leptin is like, oh, I can't communicate with the brain, I couldn't tell the brain that we have enough stored energy, it's not going to think to use it between meals. If we're spiking our blood sugar, or if we're spiking our cortisol and stress hormones because we're not eating and we're getting those big, you'll get a blood sugar spike from just, you ever wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, why did my blood sugar dip? And then it went super high, or it came back up high. That's the impact of the adrenaline that your adrenals just created for you to create new glucose in your system. And then you get a blood sugar spike. What does that blood sugar spike lead to? Insulin. What does insulin lead to? Insulin leads to the body being in a fat storage mode, not a fat burning mode. So basically, insulin locks up your stored energy on your body. So if we're using our adrenals to carry us through, we are locking up, we are continuing to keep that stored energy locked up and not allow our body to access it. And that is a key caveat, key to understanding for helping to heal hypoglycemia. So I hope this was helpful. Please be careful. Please contact me if you want help with this stuff. I've decided that I'm going to do sort of like rolling enrollments for blood sugar mastery and just fill up the cohorts. So we just filled up the fall cohort. That class is completely full. And so now I'm going to be enrolling for the winter cohort, which may start, I'm not exactly sure when, December or January. So if you are wanting my support with this sooner than later, if you're going to be wanting help through the holidays, I would love to support you. So please feel free to contact me, reach out if you want to set up a call with me to talk if this program is right for you. Typically, I do a clarity call or discovery call with people who are struggling and to see if we are the right fit for working together, because I work very closely with people. I want to make sure that I feel that I have the clinical skills and capacity to help you. And I also want to make sure you feel like this is a really good choice for you. So if that's the case, there is a link to book a call with me in the show notes of this episode. There will also be the enrollment link, and that enrollment link at the time of this recording is going to be for the winter cohort of Blood Sugar Mastery. And so, this program fills up. It filled up this time. So I want to make sure that if you are really struggling, that you are the first one in the doors, saving your seat and getting the support that you need. So I hope that this was really helpful for you. I'll see you all in the next episode. Take care.